Among my better qualities is not style. I put very little care into what I wear most days. I'm content with whatever makes me comfortable. I wear jeans 6 out of the 7 days a week, and usually just a simple t-shirt or a button-down shirt that is one of 4 colors: blue, black, brown, or green. A couple weeks ago, one of our ESL students here asked me, "Is black the only color you ever wear?" "No," I responded. "Oh," she said, "I thought you had to since you are a pastor or something." No, I'm not big on style, but this was not always the case. I, like most 8th graders just turned teenagers, cared a great deal about style. A product of the grunge days of the mid-1990s, think Pearl Jam and Nirvana, right? I wanted a bowl cut that covered my eyes, with a part down the middle of my hair, wrinkled flannel shirts for every day of the week, and jeans with huge bottoms that we pretended weren't the bell bottoms of the 70s. And by the way, those huge bottoms had to be extra long to ensure that they would fray and rip. It was the look, man, right? And the goal? To look like the cool kids at school. If what I put on every day was all I had to master to be in that group, I'd do it. But as you may have guessed already, I never made it into that group. No matter how hard I tried to fit in, no matter what I wore, no matter how grunge I had become. And luckily, within a couple of years, I just stopped caring altogether. Adolescence is that awkward time of trying to be cool and trying to fit in. We all go through it. And interestingly enough, so did the children of Israel. With so much history already under their belts, we'd like to think that they've finally grown up, matured as a nation, with their very own unique identity as God's special chosen people. But as we found out in this week's story, the Israelites are still really in their adolescent years. "Give us a king to lead us," they demand like an angry teenager. The people implore the prophet Samuel, and Samuel's reply, "Don't you get it? God is our king. If we appoint another king, an earthly king over us, he'll make sure not one of our sons and daughters escapes being his soldiers or his servants. And all those high-ranking brown-nosers that he calls his attendants, they will get all our best lands and our best crops, 1/10 of our grain and best animals. Is that what you really want?" People are defiant, and they answer Samuel, "We want a king over us." And the real reason is then revealed. Then we will be like all the other nations. Why the need to fit in like that? We want a king to lead us and go out before us and fight our battles. Here's the clue. It's no surprise the Israelites are living with some fear. The Philistines are a formidable enemy that has already defeated them twice, one time even stealing the sacred Ark of the Covenant, God's very dwelling place. News of the theft, you recall from the reading, causes the priest Eli to fall off his stool and die. Not even the news of his son's deaths did that. How could God allow the ark to be stolen, maybe they thought. Now further, the sons of that Eli, as well as those of his apprentice Samuel, put their fathers in an uncomfortable position. They were corrupt. The people see right through them. "Give us a real leader," they say. But when you get down to it, the other nations' kings are looking pretty good right now. From the lower story perspective, it makes a lot of sense. We look around at all that is happening and say, "Where are you, God?" You start to lose your trust a little bit. Your faith gets a little fainter. Give us something we can see. Proof's in the pudding, God, and we're not seeing much pudding. Give us something tangible, something real. Give us a king. And God, with trombone-like tones from heaven, thunders a loud and bellowing, okay. Wait, what? Do we ever wonder why God lets us get away with insisting on our own way of doing things, even when God knows it's not the best way? Maybe it's because God knows that the upper story will not change one bit. As much as we'd like to try, we can't derail it, even if we spend our lives trying to do it or running from it. God is going to build a nation. Yet God still allows the people the freedom to choose at their own peril. The upper story doesn't fit neatly into our categories or sometimes even our logic. Your ways are not our ways, the psalmist wrote. Your thoughts are higher than ours, O God. The people forget they're supposed to look different. God's upper story all along made that fact plain. They are to be a nation whose king is God alone, a nation built up and made holy to be a light to all of the surrounding nations. How are they going to convince the Gentiles of this fact if they appear and act as everyone else? Well, Samuel is given the hard task of carrying out the people's will. God directs him to a man with kingly potential, a man named Saul. Kingly potential, by the way, is like our saying today, he looks presidential. God has relented to the Israelites' request, and God gives them exactly what they want. A tall, handsome man with kingly potential, a king who looks like a king on the outside. Over a Thanksgiving-sized meal, Samuel tells Saul he's been selected for the job. Like Moses and Gideon before him, he's reluctant to accept the call. Come time for inauguration day, Saul can't even be found. He's hiding among the guests' luggage. No place for a king. So we get the idea already that this whole thing may not work out so well. Saul does show incredible military skill, though, as he responds to a threat from a neighboring nation. The victory is a rousing success. It is a great start for the king until he decides to make a sacrifice at Gilgal because Samuel was late in arriving. Huge mistake. The king takes the role reserved for the priest. And Samuel, when he does arrive, tells the king in no uncertain terms, your kingdom will not continue. Not something any ruler wants to hear. The unraveling of Saul's reign continues with Samuel's kind of farewell speech as prophet to his people. He recounts their history all the way back to the Exodus from Egypt and the many times following that day when they were unfaithful to God and were chided for it. Samuel reminds them as they break open the champagne bottles to celebrate this victory that they've gone against God's wishes. Their need to fit in by insisting on the king was also a declaration of distrust in God as their all-sufficient provider and leader. Unlike Moses, Samuel proves he is an excellent public speaker. The people actually repent. Samuel reminds them of their first love and that their faithfulness to God and each other mattered more than anything else. What then does Israel's king do? Promptly forgets everything Samuel just said. A bitter war is waged against the Philistines, and then God turns Saul's attention to the Amalekites. Now, this is to be a holy war. Do you remember that term from the book of Joshua, holy war? Nothing survives. Everything taken is to be dedicated to God. Saul ignores both of these rules. That King Agag would be a great trophy, right? And these animals, just look at how well we'll eat. When Saul is confronted with his mistake, he claims he took the animals to sacrifice to God. Samuel knows Saul's heart and promptly tells him it is better to obey than sacrifice. It is the end for Saul, the final unraveling. Saul is tormented. We're going to read a little more of his story next week. He has no peace except for the harp playing of a special someone in his court. Saul's daughter will fall in love with this special someone. Saul's son eventually swears his loyalty not to his father, but to this said someone as well. Anyone close to Saul or loyal to him will eventually leave or die, including Samuel. So what do you do when you need to talk with the dead? You go to a medium. So Saul goes to Endor to see if the medium there will allow Saul to speak with Samuel's spirit. The Philistines have invaded again, and Saul needs some military counsel. It is the final straw for God. And ultimately, Saul will have this very, very tragic end, as we'll read about next week. You know, God eventually warms up to the whole earthly king idea, as we'll see very clearly in the coming chapter. But we're still left humbled at the consequences of our strong need to fit in, to insist on being like everyone else. Saul not only disobeyed God, but also misrepresented God through his actions. As the new king of God's chosen nation, he caused people to get the wrong idea of what God was really like: holy, just, fair, merciful, loving, and kind. Instead, they got the picture that this God is a vindictive, greedy, selfish kind of God. And whether we like to believe it or not, we too are God's visible witness in the world. As we'll learn later in the story, we followers of Jesus are called the body of Christ on earth, the earthly representation of who Jesus is to the rest of the world. The upper story for God's people is always clear. You're supposed to look different. Not eccentric or weird, though our diversity is beautiful, of course. But different in the sense that Jesus himself looked different. As God chose Israel to accurately reflect him to other nations, so God chooses us, adopts us as sons and daughters into the family of God through Christ, to be a visible representation of Jesus in the world. Many people get their take on God from us. Did you ever think about that? I love how the story author Randy Frazee wrote it this week. We may be the only Bible people choose to read. Our interactions with others during our days on the streets and online may be all that others glimpse of God's upper stories throughout their days. What a sacred yet scary privilege that is. God entrusts us with some really important work. And either it scares us into melting into the culture at large, or it empowers us to actually take up the challenge with courage. C.S. Lewis wrote, "If you want religion to make you really comfortable, I do not recommend Christianity." Amen to that. You know, my best friend from Akron and I were talking last week, and he said something profound. He said, you know, the gospel calls us to do everything that is intuitive not to do. But when you do it, when you go up against your natural intuition to help somebody, even somebody who's not deserving, or you dare to see everyone as God's child, or you forgive when it's the last thing that you want to do, you act not only as Jesus acted, but some would even say, you act divine. Today, there is not one pitfall that we Christians have missed. We've fallen into this terrible, fear-mongering rhetoric that would have us paint an entire group of people with a single brushstroke. We've fallen into the powerful consumerist trap of days like Black Friday that get more feverish with each passing year. We've fallen into mean-spirited and uncivil discourse that has plagued our nation's conversation like a cancer, and it is eating us alive. And we've fallen often into the justification of our own collective and individual actions, laced with anything but the radical love of Jesus Christ, when love is the one single identifier that marks us as Jesus' disciples. God may let us go for a while, but sooner or later the upper story will get the upper hand. So why not align our lower stories with God's now? We are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. These are not my words, of course. These are the words of Jesus, so if they upset you, best to take it up with him. Christians, wait no more to become all that we were meant to be. Like it or not, we were made to stand out.